Before we run the clip on Noam Chomsky's thoughts on the Russian-Ukrainian war, let's go over his belief what the root causes are. Chomsky believes a primary cause of the war is the aggressive expansion of NATO eastward, despite warnings from diplomats, including George Kennan, that this would be seen as a provocation by Russia. He argues that this expansion violated assurances given to Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. Chomsky criticizes the lack of serious diplomatic efforts to address Russia's security concerns and prevent the conflict. He believes the West was unwilling to consider options like Ukrainian neutrality to avoid war. Now off to this informative clip of Chomsky, and following it will be his criticisms of the US and NATO and his call for negotiations and compromise.
U.S. policy in Ukraine remains stable. The war must continue in order to severely weaken Russia. That's policy. Britain, which is a virtual satellite of the United States now, Britain and the United States actually intervened directly last March and April to urge Ukraine not to move towards negotiations, and negotiations were going on with Russia under Turkish auspices. They broke down. We don't know exactly why, but Britain and the U.S. were very clear that we're not ready for negotiations. No, still not. The official stand remains fight the war to severely weaken Russia. If you think about it, just from a practical point of view, it's kind of sadistic, but people are in fact talking about it. It's a bargain for the United States. At a small fraction of the huge military budget, the United States is severely degrading the military forces of its main military enemy. That's being openly discussed now in the United States, and Britain pointing this out. It's pretty obvious. Whether that's a factor or not, you can debate, but it's certainly a fact. The United States, in fact, you look around, almost the entire world is suffering from this. Ukraine most, but Africa, Asia, curtailment of food and fertilizer shipments having a big effect. Europe is declining, even moving towards deindustrialization because of its the breaking of its natural trade commercial relations with Russia. The whole German-based, very successful European industrial system was based on interactions with the East. Now, Russia doesn't have much of an economy. It's about the size of Mexico, but it's very rich in resources, minerals, oil, all essential for West European industry. It's collapsing. All over the world, decline, one exception. U.S. is doing brilliantly. It's degrading the forces of its enemy at very low cost. Fossil fuel companies are just euphoric with the huge profits that come. Germany's importing liquefied natural gas from the United States at far higher costs than it could get cheaply from Russia. Arms manufacturers are doing great. Food monopolies, the global food system is half a dozen companies raising prices, profits going through the roof. It's it's very successful in many ways. How long will Europe agree to accept this? We don't know. We do know what's happening in the global south. They're just refusing to participate. It became very dramatic in the international conference in Munich a couple of weeks ago. It was an international conference, a strategic conference. The United States, Vice President Harris was there, other representatives, desperately trying to get the countries of the South to join the United States in the war. One after another said, not ours, your war. We don't pay any attention to your hypocritical proclamations. We know exactly what they mean. We've suffered from your savagery for centuries. Stop lecturing to us. Just laugh at it. we're not going to take part in this. We're going to make our own relation, our own commercial and other arrangements with Russia and particularly with China. You don't like it? Too bad. Even longtime U.S. allies like Colombia simply flatly refused. Brazil, no, it's not our war. Don't know what Mexico said, but probably something similar. Asia, India, Indonesia, sorry, we continue in our own way. The United States is quite isolated. The English-speaking countries, and for the time being, continental Europe are essentially isolated. Probably 90% of the countries in the world don't even observe the sanctions. Meanwhile, China is moving ahead with its loan, development, investment projects, also moving ahead diplomatically. It just threw a major wrench in long-term U.S. policy in the Middle East by arranging the Saudi-Iranian negotiations. It's a very severe blow to the United States. Control of the Middle East has been a prime concern of U.S. foreign policy since the Second World War. Now China comes, and the United States was working very hard to put together an alliance of the most reactionary states in the region in a conflict with Iran. It's called the Abraham Accords. And the United States were supposed to applaud it as wonderful. It's actually a reactionary alliance subordinated to the United States aimed at Iran. China just dismantled it, took the main element. Saudi Arabia was not technically a member of the Accords, but basically part of it. The main source of oil, pulled it into the Chinese system. It had already happened with the United Arab Emirates, the other major state. China has two major development programs for Eurasia. There's what's called the New Silk Road, which goes through the Eurasian countries, but there's also a maritime Silk Road, runs along the south through the seas. One of the hubs is the United Arab Emirates, the main, along with Saudi Arabia, the main U.S. ally in the region, the hub of the maritime Silk Road of China. These things are all taking place. The U.S. can't stop them with guns. That's the U.S. comparative advantage, military force. But it doesn't stop these things. They continue, and the world is moving towards complicated reconstruction. Ukraine war is part of it. Ukraine war has driven, apart from the criminality of the aggression, major crime, it's also criminally stupid from Putin's point of view. He gave the United States its fondest wish, Europe, on a silver platter, instead of an accommodation between Russia, Germany, to the benefit of both, drive Europe into the hands of Washington, and Russia moves to the east. We don't have the details of the latest meeting of China and Russia a couple of days ago, but what's leaking out indicates probably that the part of it is economic policies, Chinese development of industrial projects in eastern Siberia and access to the rich mineral resources of eastern Siberia. That's very likely as Russia moves to the east. Europe sits in the pocket of the United States and declines. India, Indonesia, South Africa, Brazil, they're just going in their own direction, making their own arrangements. That seems the way the world is moving. And the U.S. has one overwhelmingly powerful weapon, violence, but it doesn't work very well in this situation.
Chomsky points to the historical record of illegal U.S. invasions, such as Iraq, to highlight the hypocrisy of Western condemnation of Russia. He finds the U.S. outrage over violations of international law to be selective. Chomsky is critical of the ongoing supply of weapons to Ukraine, arguing that it prolongs the war and suffering without realistically achieving Ukraine's goals of total victory and reclaiming all lost territory. He consistently emphasizes the dangers of continued escalation and the very real threat of nuclear war. Chomsky's key recommendation is to cease sending weapons, move immediately towards serious diplomatic negotiations, and aim for a realistic compromise that addresses both Russia's security concerns and Ukraine's sovereignty, even if that compromise isn't perfect. Well, I hope you liked the video and subscribe to the channel. If you wish to become a member to support the channel, please do. Now, take care and bye-bye.